After the first Democratic presidential debate on June 25 to 26, Joe Biden fell in Democratic national presidential polls, and Kamala Harris surged. In lead-up to the July 30-31 debate, Biden recovered lost support while Harris lost some of her gains. Read more: U.S. Democratic presidential primaries, Biden leading, followed by Sanders, Warren, Harris, and will Trump be beaten? Since the debate, the biggest movement is clear gains for Elizabeth Warren, while Harris has continued to fall. In the Real Clear Politics National Democratic poll average, Biden currently leads with 30.8%, followed by Warren at 18.0%, Bernie Sanders at 16.8%, Harris at 8.3%, and Pete Buttigieg at 6.3%. All other candidates are at 2% or less. As I wrote previously, 4 states, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada and South Carolina, hold the primaries or caucuses in February 2020, while all other states need to wait until at least March 2020. So early state polls are important. In the only poll conducted since the second Democratic debate in Iowa, Biden led with 28%, followed by Warren at 19%, Harris at 11%, Sanders at 9% and Buttigieg at 8%. In New Hampshire, there have been 2 polls since the debate. One has Biden at 21%, Sanders 17%, Warren 14%, Harris 8% and Buttigieg 6%. The other gives Sanders a lead with 21%, followed by Biden at 15%, Warren 12%, Buttigieg 8% and Harris 7%. In general election polling, Biden has a high single-digit lead over Donald Trump, Sanders a mid-single-digit lead, and both Warren and Harris have low single-digit leads. Biden's perceived electability is crucial in explaining his continued strong polling, as this tweet from analyst Nate Silver says. For the next Democratic presidential debate on September 12, the threshold for participation has been increased. As a result, there are likely to be far fewer candidates than the 20 in each of the first 2 debates. Trump's ratings slightly down after gun massacres on August 3-4. 31 people were murdered in 2 separate gun massacres in El Paso, Texas and Dayton, Ohio. In the 538 poll aggregate, Trump's ratings are slightly down since these massacres. With all polls, Trump's ratings are 41.9% approve, 53.6% disapprove, for a net approval of -11.7%. With polls of registered or likely voters, his ratings are 42.6% approve, 53.3% disapprove, for a net approval of -10.7%. Perhaps due to his anti-immigrant rhetoric, Trump's net ratings have fallen about 1.5 points since my previous article a month ago, and this trend has continued after the massacres. In the latest U.S. jobs report, the unemployment rate remained at just 3.7% as 164,000 jobs were added in July. These jobs reports have been good news for Trump. I wrote an old but still relevant article on my personal website last year about how the low U.S. participation rate holds down the unemployment rate compared to Australia. The question that should be asked about Trump is why, given the strong U.S. economic performance, his net approval is well below 0. 538 has historical data from 12 presidents going back to Harry Truman, and Trump's net approval is only ahead of Jimmy Carter at this point in their presidencies. If there is an economic downturn before the November 2020 general election, Trump is likely to be far more vulnerable. An economic downturn could occur due to Trump's trade war with China, or due to a no-deal Brexit in the UK. I wrote for the Poll Bludger on August 2 that the UK Parliament is running out of options to prevent no deal, which PM Boris Johnson's hard leave cabinet suggests he will pursue. In my previous Poll Bludger article on July 23, I talked about Johnson's crushing victory, 66.4 to 33.6, in a conservative member's ballot. Trump can still win the 2020 election, despite his low approval ratings, if he is able to either demonize his eventual Democratic opponent, or win the Electoral College despite losing the popular vote, as occurred in 2016. However, recent state-by-state polling has Trump's net approval below zero in 10 states he carried in 2016, and in some of those states his ratings are well below zero. Read more: U.S. 2016 election final results, how Trump won. If all the states where Trump's net approval is currently negative were to go to the Democrat would win the presidency by an emphatic 419 to 119 votes in the Electoral College. Australian election preference flows. And the first news poll on August 2, the Electoral Commission released data on how every minor party's preferences flowed between the major parties at the May federal election. The Greens, who won 10.4% of the primary vote, flowed heavily to Labour, 82.2%. The Clive Palmer's UAP, 3.4% of the vote, flowed at 65.1% to Coalition, and One Nation, 3.1% of the vote, was almost identical in its flow, 65.2%. Excluding the Greens, UAP, and One Nation, others' preferences were 50.7% to Labour. Analyst Kevin Bonham says there was barely any increase in the Greens' preference flow to Labour since 2016. The Greens' flow increased in 4 states, fell slightly in Queensland, and was weaker in SA as more moderate voters returned to the Greens after the collapse of Centre Alliance. In 2016, One Nation preferences were just 50.4% to the Coalition, so the Coalition's flow from One Nation increased almost 15%. In 2013, Palmer's party preferences were 53.7% to the Coalition, so the UAP's flow to the Coalition improved 11.4%. Preference shifts advantaged the Coalition by 0.8% on the national two-party vote compared to if no preference shifts had occurred. The Coalition's overall share of minor party preferences, 40.4%, was its best since 2001, when the Greens only had 5%. Read more: difficult for Labour to win in 2022 using new pendulum, plus Senate and House preference flows in the first news poll since the election. The Coalition led by 53 to 47, from primary votes of 44% Coalition, 33% Labour, 11% Greens and 3% One Nation. Scott Morrison's ratings were 51% satisfied, 36% dissatisfied, for a net approval of 15, a big improvement from one in the final pre-election news poll that was biased against the Coalition. Anthony Albanese's initial ratings were 39% satisfied, 36% dissatisfied. Morrison led by 48 to 31 as better PM. This poll was conducted July 25 to 28 from a sample of 1,600. Bonham says there is no indication in the Australian's report that anything has changed at Newspoll since the election's poll failure. As I wrote after the election, there was, and still is, a lack of adequate documentation of Newspoll's methods. Read more: Newspoll probably wrong since Morrison became PM. Polling has been less accurate at recent elections. Spain's socialists failed to form government. The Spanish socialists won the April 28 election, but as I wrote on my personal website on August 1, a lack of cooperation between the socialists and far-left Podemos could mean another election. Also covered, a landslide for former comedian Zelensky's party in the Ukraine, and the Conservatives easily retain their hold over Japan's upper house. Let's block ads. Why?